it just New Zealand feeling the rising cost of our grocery bills, or is it an international issue? We sent our reporters around the world on a mission, a one-stop supermarket shop armed with an identical shopping list and under instruction to not use the store discount card. Take a look.
Kia ora team.
Let's get straight into business. 6 organic eggs, $4.80 New Zealand.
Eggs, $6.90.
6-pack free-range eggs, these are $4.45 in New Zealand.
So $7.60 New Zealand.
Butter worked out $6.50.
$8 New Zealand dollars for that butter.
Here in the US cost us just over $10.30.
500 grams of butter is $8 New Zealand dollars.
We've got the milk, $2.50.
$2.52.
$2.70 for this.
$3.22-ish.
Standard mince was $8.90.
7 New Zealand dollars for that 500 grams of mince.
Which translate to around $9.70.
The cheese, $4.50 New Zealand.
$7.50 for the cheese.
$4.30 for 250 grams.
Cheese, $5.30 in New Zealand dollars.
A loaf of bread, 39 pence, that's 80 New Zealand cents.
It's about $4.80 in Australia for that.
One loaf of standard white bread, about $5.60 when you convert that to New Zealand dollars.
Cheapest chips, bread, nothing special about the 600 gram loaf, $1.30.
And all up, this overwhelming pile of food.
All up, that costs
$14.
Well, that was all. They were all in New Zealand dollars in that segment. Quite interesting. We can see New Zealand is not quite top of the table, but it's certainly costly here. Some of the economic levers that come into play when deciding the prices on our shelves are things like infrastructure and transport costs, and yes, even the number of competing chains. Here to break it all down for us, Principal Economist at Cognitus Economic Insight, Richard Mead. Good morning.
Morning.
Tell us about these levers. What determines the prices in our supermarkets?
Most fundamentally, obviously, it's having the number of competing chains. And I mean, competing not just at the retail level, but also at the upstream part of the supermarket sector where they're buying goods, warehousing, distributing, and running logistics, etc. So vertical integration, if you like, between the upstream and downstream bits. The more competing vertically integrated chains your economy can support, the better sort of deals you'd expect to get. So that's probably the highest level driver. Of course, there's the conduct between firms that matters. If firms, for example, were colluding on prices and our Commerce Commission's market study didn't find evidence of this, that's the sort of thing you'd want to ban because that obviously drives up prices and could be stopped. But longer term, it's the things that enable entry into the sector by these vertically integrated players that's the most fundamental driver of the competitive outcomes.
Whenever particularly dairy products in New Zealand are expensive, and we're all asking, why is this so expensive? They come from the cows down the road and they always say international prices, we're paying international prices. So you're telling me that's not the only part of the equation here?
Oh, that's certainly part of the equation when it comes to exported products, because of course the producers of those products have to figure out where to sell them, and if they're getting better returns overseas, that's going to mean they want to divert their output that way. But even given that, how firms are arranged in their competitor configuration and how they conduct themselves in the market are obviously important drivers of this. And I should mention that how competitive or not competitive supermarkets are is a two-edged sword, of course, because retail customers would prefer to have more competition at the retail level and have lower retail margins and prices. But at the same time, they want their supermarkets to be quite muscled up when they're negotiating with suppliers, especially large international suppliers, so they can get the best possible deals for them.
It's a fine line there, isn't it? So where does this variance between the countries come from then?
There are very many different drivers, of course. Part of it is the size of the market, the distribution of customers, how costly it is to set up the infrastructure. So things like the warehousing, distribution centres, etc., which are so critical for getting products from thousands of different suppliers to consumers. A country like New Zealand has some obvious challenges because we're a fairly low population. We're quite spread out. We don't have very many concentrated cities. So if you want to service the New Zealand economy, you actually need to have a certain number of distribution centres around the country, convenient to the markets that they serve. And because they're usually large things, quite expensive to invest in because they have economies of scale, you can only have so many of them. And that does naturally tend to limit how many competitors you can have in any single market.
Does the strength of our New Zealand dollar play a part in this?
Obviously, it would help to make it more affordable to obtain overseas goods, so that matters. It could also, of course, affect the returns that our exporting producers get. And so for goods that we import, that should be a good thing, but having a more competitive exchange rate might make it more viable for exporters to divert their product offshore. And so that might make things like apples and milk more expensive locally.
Principal Economist, Cognitus Economic Insight, Richard Mead, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's 10 to 8.
Yes.